Fight for the things that you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you. Women were silent. They were silenced by the men and the culture that surrounded them, hushed them, telling them to swallow the pill of belittlement and humiliation. They dedicated themselves to a profession where they were perceived as second-rate and paid as second-rate. However, Billie Jean King and 8 other tennis revolutionaries decided to risk their careers and become the voice of change. The original 9 joined the fight for equality and showed the world that women are just as worthy as men and should be paid as such, equally.
In 1888, women's tennis clubs were established in major cities like Chicago and New York, but it wasn't until almost 100 years later that women's tennis would be considered as seriously as men's. Tennis was a man's sport, and so 9 courageous women made the fateful decision to change that. Billie Jean King, Peaches Barkowitz, Rosie Casals, Julie Heldman, Christy Pigeon, Nancy Ritchie, Valerie Ziegenfuss, Judy Dalton, and Carrie Melville met in Houston, Texas to form what is now noted as the original 9 of September 23, 1970.
And I often wonder, well, if the original 9 hadn't happened, where would women's tennis be?
These women united to further the effort to change the status quo that had long reigned over the sport of tennis.
Everybody played was white, and I asked, where's everybody else? And that's when I dedicated my life to equality for everyone, men, women, everybody, all genders.
And advocating for women's rights, they were putting their careers and futures on the line to cross the frontier of equal pay.
9 of us were willing to give up our careers for the rest of our lives and never play again for this opportunity to start something, to make the world a better place.
They signed $1 contracts with the World Tennis Magazine publisher Gladys Heldman and crossed the point of no return. They took a stand despite the threat of suspension from the United States Lawn and Tennis Association. The contract wasn't about the $1, but about steering away from the male-dominated tennis establishment and proving that women could stand on their own, separate from men. Women could have their own tour, their own futures. And they did just that. In 1973, women earned a median of 56.6 cents to every dollar a man earned. In a stark contrast, in 2020, women earned 83 cents to the man's dollar, 26.4 cents more than before the original 9 crossed the frontier.
8 tournaments would take place for women in 1970 alone, when virtually none had existed just a year prior. Women now had a voice. They had a career. They had a future, and the original 9 paved it. After Billie Jean King founded the WTA with over 60 tennis players in 1973, she showed the world that she was a force to be reckoned with. Mere weeks after King founded the WTA, she played Bobby Riggs in what became known as the Battle of the Sexes.
Bobby Riggs, he was a former #1 player. He'd won the Triple Crown at Wimbledon.
King was facing a man that stood for everything she was fighting to tear down. Male spectators stacked their cards in Riggs' favor.
I know Bobby for many years. I played with him. I think that no matter what they want to say, there is no way that a good woman can beat a fairly good man.
King defeated Riggs in straight sets, earning her a prize of $100,000. With 50 million people in the United States and an estimated 90 million people worldwide watching, this tournament served as a frontier for women's tennis players, demanding that women were real competitors in the professional world. Women's tennis was just as worthy of attention as men's. The original 9 not only gave women the right to be seen, but changed the way they were viewed by men. They began to see women as capable and worthy of equal pay. The original 9 were role models for the next generation of young female athletes who grew up believing that they could be something bigger than themselves. Amongst those inspired by the 9 were novelties like Pam Shriver, winner of 11 doubles championships.
As part of our documentary, we contacted Pam Shriver and Tracy Austin and asked them what the original 9 meant to them.
Some of what Tracy and Pam said
Hey, Raina, it's Pam Shriver. Yeah, the original 9, near and dear to all of us. You know, the ideals of equality and treating women equally to the men. So we owe them a ton, and I'll forever be grateful.
Hi there, Raina. It's Tracy Austin. They felt that it was so important, and so all the players that have played since that time, including myself, all the players that are playing now, really need to hand it to those 9 ladies that were willing to put their careers on the line, willing to take a stand for what they believed in.
Shriver was an icon for the new era of tennis, alongside Tracy Austin, the youngest player to ever win a title at just 16 years old. Women's tennis was no longer recreational. It was a profession that, for the first time in history, paid female athletes enough to support themselves.
In light of the increasing recognition that female tennis players were receiving, sponsors such as Colgate and Avon began to invest in the WTA athletes. By 1980, more than 250 women were playing professionally all over the world in a tour consisting of 47 global events, offering a total of $7.2 million in prize money. The financial opportunities for women skyrocketed from virtually nothing to everything. The bravery of the original 9 paved the way for women of all ethnicities, backgrounds, and sexual orientations to win the recognition they deserve. The true impacts of Billie Jean King and her fellow teammates were fully realized when Serena and Venus Williams came onto the world stages as tennis powerhouses. As a result of the original 9's determination, the sisters have been able to fight for more rights for Black tennis players through the use of their immense platforms and far-reaching audiences. They added another layer to the fight for equal pay that included Black women all across America who suffered an even wider pay gap than white women to white men due to the compounded effect of both racism and sexism. And while still more needs to be done, the sisters owe it all to King and her comrades. The media attention that the original 9 have brought to female tennis has forced the public to reimagine what women are deserving of. In fact, the story of Bobby Riggs and Billie Jean King has become so popular that a movie was made about it called The Battle of the Sexes in 2017. People who had never even thought of women's tennis as relevant realize how much of a role the original 9 have played in gender equality. Their efforts in tennis made it one of the few sports in the modern world that offers relatively equal pay opportunities for men and women to this day.
The equality that the original 9 have brought to women's tennis extended around the world. In 2007, Wimbledon and Roland Garros finally made prize money in all 4 Grand Slams equal. In 2008, Doha, Qatar became the host of the Sony Eckerson Championship. And in 2011, Li Na of China became the first Asian woman to win a Grand Slam title when she won Roland Garros. For the first time in tennis history, each member of the top 10 players in the world were from different nations. For the first time in history, women around the world had access to success.
It's great that we're having this tournament, but then what? And it was the then what that I kept thinking about.
Then what? This is the question we must ask ourselves today as the fight for equality continues to spread around the world.
There is still a significant pay gap between men and women. For example, the Western and Southern Open, one of the largest tournaments in the tennis world, pays women 63 cents for every dollar the men make. Women carry out at least 2.5 times more unpaid work than men. At the current rate, it will take 257 years to close the global gender pay gap. Despite this, the WTA is actively working towards reaching equality. The original 9 broke barriers in the tennis world when they established the first women's league in professional tennis. They crossed the frontier in the sports world to advocate equal pay for women and fought against systemic discrimination on the basis of sex. But they did much more than forge equality on the court. They forged the path for new women, new generations, new pioneers.